So remember that Friday Live when I held up a bunch of ratty T-shirts and enthused about all the thingies all over them and where they came from? Well, this one's a little similar, and it actually is pretty heartfelt. I, as usual, am always going through the stuff we have in an unconstructed way around this place when the dim hope that I'll get to live longer in this house in order than I have had to live in it out of order. That hope feebly struggles on. Well, anyway, in the course of attempting to get there, I found a bag. And it's one of those times when you find a bag and you're like, oh, this stuff, I'm really, really glad. I knew this was all somewhere with all sorts of stuff in it. For those of you who don't know, I wrote a book slash game, mostly book, that concerned Cold War spying in Berlin, which dominated my life for a number of years. And for example, just some of the crap that was in this bag that I like very much, all of it. The one of my intelligence buddies, who shall remain nameless, as they prefer to do, um, picked up some CIA pack of cards for me from the place itself. Now, I don't think that's a big deal. I think anybody can just walk into their gift shop and get a pack of cards. But we used this to play my game Spiona with, and it was fun. So it's anyway. There you go. But what I'm really going to talk about are bookmarks. Now, for those of you who did not know, which is probably few of you, I am a bibliophile of a certain stripe, which is reading first. I don't like to put a book on my shelf unless I have read it. And although they are currently not in this condition, most of my life, my books have been in extremely strict author alphabetical order, and I, prided myself on not forgetting. I learned early that I need to reread in order to process books in a long-term way and not to lose sight of them in terms of other things that I encounter of any kind, reading or otherwise. I mean, that I encounter at all. And I don't want to lose sight of anything I've read in that context. So I want the library to be alive in me and as an active thing, here that I live in. And that's basically how I've lived since I learned to read. And so anyway, having the books up and available right now, they're all available, but the order is crap, and I'm pissed off all the time at itching to need, I got to read that one. It's got to be around here somewhere. No, I do not like it got to be around here somewhere, not even a little, especially for the books. But at least they're up and about. So anyway, that brings me to bookmarks. When I was a kid, there were several bookstores in the Monterey Peninsula area. One of the ones had been around for a while, was near the mouth of Carmel Valley. It was called the Thunderbird, and had a coffee shop and stuff like that. And around 1970, that was pretty cool. Well, not as common as it became later. And there were a variety of others that I frequented or knew about as a little kid. But the main one opened up very close to where we lived. There was um, at the time, it seemed wonderful. In retrospect, it's sort of the beginning of the end, but the opening up of the Alpha Beta shopping plaza near my neighborhood in Del Monte Park in Pacific Grove, well, it did include a little bookstore, which at the time was local. It later became kind of franchised out, but at the time it was local. It was called Bookworks, and was quite a haven. It had a full, just like the Thunderbird, it had a full selection of Tintin, for example, um, and it ended up, being, it had chairs, it was comfy. I forgot to mention the Three Rings bookstore at Fisherman's Wharf in Monterey, which later would become a serious teen hangout for me, as I would cycle over there and hang there quite a lot. At this time, the big one in Carmel, I'm not even sure when they built that sort of sunken shopping center area that they got eventually. and built that lower floor with the ritzy restaurant and everything. But down there was a bookstore as well. That was a big deal for me as a teen. But I'm talking about before a number of these really sprang up. And at that time, Bookworks was a real gem. In that same area, there was also a little bookshop too, that I liked a lot. And then down in New Monterey, um, all of the skanky little places. There was this little teeny hole in the wall. It wasn't even a shop. It was like a closet between two shops, right? You had the diagonal door on the slant on the pillar between two actual storefronts, and in it, was a weird little guy, and in his all the books and stuff, and anyway, there's a zillion bookstores that opened and closed along that whole area, and I knew them all. As well as Strawberry Books down in Cannery Row, which moved around a lot, but lasted a surprisingly long time, and that had a lot of comics. So, okay, back to Bookworks because it was so close, and I pretty much lived there. I basically just sat up there and I would read. For those of you who may remember those times, the odd paperback book was $1.25, which with tax was $1.33. And given my meager income, I would save, and I'd be like, okay, 34 more cents and I've got a book. So, that I kind of had this set of change and stuff, on my little shelf by my bed, and I would move it around and say, okay, there's a book right there, and I'm saving up for another, and I'll go and I'll be able to get 2 books. So anyway, I had bookmarks from Bookworks for years. It eventually moved. By the time I was in high school, it moved downtown in Pacific Grove, down by the ocean. But anyway, I never forgot it. And so anyway, I had tons and tons of those, and they're all for there. There was I don't know if it was Carl Sandburg or just sort of a generic beatniky kind of guy from a later period or whatever, but they had a cartoon dude on their bookmark, which was very beige, and this little Bookworks logo. And I had dozens of those, and they've all worn out. I used them routinely for reading for years and years and years, and I kind of sadly watched as each one sort of decayed. And now I look in this pile of bookmarks, and I don't see a Bookworks, which makes me sad. Maybe there are. I thought I had 1 or 2 kind of spongy, rounded corner, folded, beat up old ones left over, but I didn't see them anyway. So what do we see? We see some quirky shit. One is actually, you might recognize these. This is the tough label thing that used to come with Levi's, which seemed to have become just sort of cheap ass cotton pants or something. But back in the 70s, I mean, it says this is a pair of Levi's, and then it gives you this long spiel about them. And I got to say, they were like burlap. I mean, these things could, stand up to anything. And so the tag thingy, this is not like attached or anything. I mean, it wasn't like attached to the pants. It came with them in some way. And I had a bunch of these, but I saved this one because, and it's durable as the pants. I mean, this thing can't rip this thing, and God knows what it's made of. And it's a great bookmark. I used it all the time, and I'm glad to have it back. I'll be bookmarking with it soon. This is from the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which was built after I left. And when the first time I went there, I saw that they had these cool jellies stickers, and I got the stickers, and then I realized why use the stickers. This, I kept it in the plastic, and this thing's a great bookmark. So use that. This one is sadly nothing but some corporate shit from Barnes and Noble, but it happens to be beautiful. So, and it's durable too. I mean, this is another wait, is this paper? Kind of thing. And so I kept that and used that. This belongs in one of my role-playing games. This is from, I believe, the 5th edition of Call of Cthulhu, the little bookmark, the little rules page reference that came with it. And I often wondered what happened to that because it's nice. And It was with the bookmarks. Apparently, I was using it as a bookmark, not with the game. So now I have it. Now, that's all very interesting, but what really matters to me is the bookmarks as a way of life indicator as you look back on them. And I, accumulate them, obviously. And I don't know if you're going to believe this. And I don't think the culture really maintains this, at least in my experience. By the 2000s, what I'm talking about was largely gone, not entirely, but largely gone. It used to be that nearly anywhere in the United States, you could find a funky little bookstore. You could find, the place with the coffee machine, and they varied, from skanky to, extra neat, and the proprietor would vary from sort of, grumpy unshaven guy to, unreconstructed, radical hippie lady. And but somehow they're all the same. And what you can find there is unspeakable, and just unbelievable what you can just, poke about and find. I didn't really talk about the famous ones in Chicago. I mean, I lived in Chicago for 6 years in the 80s, and then for more than that, for about 18 years, from 1999 to 2017. And you can bet that me and the Chicago bookstores, I mean, I lived on 57th Street in Hyde Park, for God's sake. I mean, me and the bookstores knew each other well. Pretty much anything I earned went there. But so I'm not going into all that detail. Any Chicagoan will recognize them all. And yes, I've been to all of them. And yes, I lived in all of them. Well, anyway, so you can see some sign of that. There's some bookmarks that aren't too remarkable to a Chicagoan. There's, Lincoln Park bookstores of different kinds, Booksellers Row, and so on. Myopic Books, right down in the whatever you call it, that neighborhood. Another one called Bookworks, but it's not the same Bookworks. It's this was on Clark, and you can go on and on. I mean, there's the Stars the Stars Our Destination, the name of the bookstore, and many, many others. Now, some other things crop up. The Book Tree is in Monterey, but it wasn't really a big deal until after I left, and then it became kind of a go-to for cool old books in downtown Monterey. So I have the Book Tree here, as well as other places that I've lived. When I lived in Georgia, in Valdosta, a surprisingly great bookstore there called the Book Rack that I would attend. More and more stuff. I mean, keep going. It's like Lincoln Park, Rogers Park. There's the Black Star from Rogers Park, and all these things. And a few other interesting artifacts. I mean, this is from Alachua County, which is where Gainesville is, and it's a bookmark. It says date due, but it's not actually an indicator of your book that's due. It's anyway, it's a rules for borrowing kind of thing, and all this stuff about the library. So those are sort of like where I lived. But some of these, and I bet there's another cache of these somewhere, are more of the bookstores that I only encountered once because I was traveling. And as I said, back then, anywhere could have one of these bookstores somewhere. And being somebody who traveled by thumb and by train and by driving and a wide variety of other ways through many, many parts of the United States, many, many times, often on my own schedule, or at least, I knew I had to be somewhere by a certain point, but I was unmonitored until that time. And at that point, used books really, really weren't expensive at all. So that meant, even on a very meager income, you could pick up, a number of books. And, it's, I suppose you could look at this romantically, but if you would imagine like, a 20-year-old with shoulder length hair on some highway in Colorado, nipping over, the concrete drainage ditches that'll run alongside highways and stuff like that, right? You clamber down from the side of the road and go across that, and then there's a little hill there, and then there's some trees and some shade, and you've got your food for the day, which is an orange and a jar of peanut butter. And you could find me, perched there wearing a pair of, now that I think about it, a pair of battered Levi's, reading a book. And so, I'm sure there were many other things I could have been doing to make money or otherwise be useful to somebody in the 80s besides doing that. But a certain amount of my time was spent that way. So anyway, be useful to somebody in the 80s besides doing that. But a certain amount of my time was spent that way. So anyway, nobody's going to believe me. It feels like I could sniff them out. I had been to so many cities and little towns when I would go on academic conferences later, when I had degrees and stuff on things to do, sciencey things to do. I would often stay an extra day, and everybody was like, okay, see you going tomorrow. And I'd be like, I'm staying an extra day. And the reason would be so that I could just hit that city or that town or wherever we were, just hit it like, a battalion, going on the bookstore hunt. If it was a substantial size city, I would actually, I remember shocking a friend of a friend that I was staying with. They, I pulled out the phone book and I went through the yellow pages and I said, I got a city map, and I, basically planned it out. I'm going to hit, okay, this store's here, this store's here, this store's, and the guy's looking at me like I am fucking nuts. And I went to all these different places. Well, that's a little more organized, but when that's not really sniffing out the way that I'm talking about. I'm talking about when you're driving through town, or you're kind of walking along the street, maybe you're going with a bunch of fellow academics for lunch, and you kind of go, if I was a bookstore, I'd be like around that corner, It's some sort of cultural understanding of what sort of zones / venues / historical details go into where bookstores are, particularly of this kind. Whatever it was, I had it. And surprise people any number of times. I'd sort of stop and do the Doberman, or the hunting dog, look and go, hold on, guys, hold on. There's a bookstore over there. And they'd be like, what are you talking about? I'd be like, come on. I'd be, I almost feel as though, I'd be casting back and forth, at the corners and go that way, And so my wife, Cecilia, I had mentioned something of this sort, and she, didn't really believe me. But early in the relationship, we were driving through Beloit, Wisconsin, and where I had never been, and there was a reason for us to go for some reason. And I, we stopped, and I said, it's right around here somewhere. There's got to be one. It's got to be right. Okay, here, stop the car. Let me get out this way. And I went, and bam, there it was, groovy little bookstore. And Cecilia's like, how the hell did you do that? And the same thing would happen a lot. Well, so a lot of these bookstores come from those places, which I would visit, one time, having chanced upon them, all the way from, oh wait, here's another Chicago one, Quimby's, but all the way around. Places from Tallahassee, places from, Bellevue. A lot of these ones are from Florida. Apparently, this is the Florida batch when I was living there and cruised around in different places for different reasons. But for example, the one time that I went to Arizona in the late 80s to go hiking in the Superstition Mountains. And sure enough, here it is. It's even got a little rider weight Fool Tarot Guy, on the bookmark, which lets you know a little about the bookstore, and plenty of others. I mean, there's Madison people in Wisconsin will recognize alternate realities. No big deal. Thousands of people go there every day, but hey, that was the time I went there. And different kinds of book warehouses, some of them being, kind of mysterious. Oh yeah, this is when I was that time when I did the sort of, campaign thing with all the, the maps and everything. That was actually in St. Petersburg in Florida, and here it is, Haslam's bookstore. From there, other ones, Cedar Key. So you can kind of see, oh yeah, and then of course from Sonoma, where it's no surprise, of course, that there's any number of weird little bookstores scattered around, Guerneville and whatnot. And so, you can bet I've seen them all. So kind of cool. I'm glad I found them, and especially I'm going to start using them again. I'm not too systematic about it. I mean, it's not as though I say, well, I'm going to read this book, and then I got to go looking through the bookmarks to see which one matches it. But it may worry you to know that I can see that behavior from here. And that's kind of where I stop myself and say, you really don't need to be quite, the world does not need to be here. And that's kind of where I stop myself and say, you really don't need to be quite, the world does not need to be that ordered. Pick the top one, be happy. But I can see that behavior from here. Well, anyway, nice to have them. Sort of a lifestyle thing for me. And I know where they go. There's, obviously the little pull-out drawer at the bedstand is a perfect place for your little cache of bookmarks, and kind of pleased to have them. But I do miss those days. Times do seem to have changed in terms of bookstore availability-ness. More and more of those places, closed up, and I hope more have opened, but given all things of the last couple of decades, I'd be awfully surprised if any of them were viable. But still, if you know one, go pet the cat and have a cup of coffee and, chat up whatever it is that the proprietor seems to be into. Always an adventure. And very much a lifestyle thing throughout all the decades.